This episode is brought to you by Pause, Breathe, Reflect, the app that can help bring more mindfulness to your everyday moments. Imagine what would be possible if more people could live more mindfully. Hey there, it's Michael. Welcome to the Kintsugi Podcast, a show for perfectly imperfect people everywhere. Well, we did it, my friend, from a spare bedroom somewhere in the state of New Jersey, Garden State. We made it to the end of chapter 2 in the Kintsugi Podcast. And before we flip into chapter 3, which I promise there'll be a plot twist, let's go back. A little history. So back in 2019, a whole bunch of my friends said, Michael, you got to have a podcast because everyone's having a podcast. It's the thing to do. But my heart wasn't into it. I really didn't know what I was going to say, but I knew this, that Kintsugi was a perfect metaphor for what was ailing us at the time, not only here in America, but across the world. And I've had the privilege and pleasure of traveling all around America and all around the world. And what I've discovered is that we're all going through something at one time or another. And it is true that we have so much more in common than divides us. And if we can find a way to come together to heal, we can go, as cliche as this sounds, we can go far together. So I knew Kintsugi, in the spirit of Kintsugi, was something that I wanted to share with folks. But I didn't know how to do a podcast. I really had no idea what I was doing, but I felt the pressure to do one. I didn't listen to my mom's advice because I would often go to her and say, Mom, I want to do this because all the other kids are doing it. And she would say, well, that's not a good enough reason to do it. They all wanted to jump off a bridge. Would you do that? And I'd be like, no. Then why do you want to do this? Whatever this was at the time in my childhood. So I ignored my mom's advice and I listened to all the kids who told me you got to get into podcasting. It's the thing to do. So I did at the end of 2019. But then the pandemic hit, which as an event was probably also perfect in terms of alignment to this whole Kintsugi spirit that I wanted to share with folks. But by the time we got to 2021, I was feeling it. As an executive coach, helping business leaders through the pandemic, also as a meditation teacher, leading 4 practices every day, I was taking on a lot of the energy in the spaces I was creating. And now, add on top of this, podcasting and my group coaching program, I was putting a lot of rocks in my backpack. And if you know my story, you know that my accident back in 2001 blew apart my backpack. So I knew enough. I had more wisdom in 2021 than I did in 2001. Oh, by the way, did I mention I also had a total knee replacement that year? So I was going through a lot. So I decided to hit pause on the podcast, as well as my coaching program. I just needed some space to breathe. I needed to practice what I preach. So we hit pause. And then in 2023, as I was riding my bike from Buffalo, New York to Battery Park, the tip of Manhattan, along the Erie Canal and the Empire State Trail, I came into the cute town of Amsterdam, New York, and I had pizza with one of my good friends. And she said, you need to bring back the podcast. We need to hear your voice. And I was like, okay. And then the next day, someone also told me the same thing. So as I finished my ride across the Empire State, I thought about, would there be a chapter 2 in the Kintsugi Podcast? If so, how would it look? So I decided to share little episodes from my bike ride across America, which I shared with you this year, called Open Awareness. I wanted to further showcase how amazing this country is, even though we're in a bit of a kerfuffle. We're divided, 2 sides, going to war, all that Frankie Goes to Hollywood stuff. You can play the song in your head right now. But I do believe this, that the country known as America is beautiful. Her nature is beautiful. Her people are beautiful. And yes, we see the world in a lot of different ways, but we have so much more in common. And I wanted to share that with people through the podcast. And I hope you've enjoyed those little episodes. But I also wanted to bring forward other people's stories because there's so many stories amongst us that are amazing, that are inspirational and motivational. People that have hit rock bottom but found a way to rise back up in that Kintsugi spirit. And we've brought forward a lot of great guests, like Megan Swan and Kira Tarea, 2 really big-hearted people I met at Rich Roll's retreat in Tuscany in 2023 rather. And one of the highlights for me this year was being on his show, which aired back in April. We also brought in authors like Jerry Colano, who talked about belonging. Kristen Graham, my favorite word nerd, and she shared how to choose our words with intentionality so we can have better conversations with other people. We brought in more public figures like Kira Michelle from One Peloton, one of my favorite yoga instructors, and we talked about what it's like to be a celebrity in her space and just the pressure of social media. And Brad Stolberg, a great author and a huge University of Michigan fan. So go Wolverines, go blue. And I also had a chance to talk to an Olympic gold medalist, Joe Jacoby. He shared how to navigate the waves of life. And also Adam Pierce, who spoke about the power of community and mindfulness and resilience through his work with his nonprofit, Love Your Brain. He actually is a CNN Hero of the Year from last year. So I had a chance to sit down with a lot of great humans and share their stories with you. And I hope many of them resonated with you. But podcasting is a tough gig. It's not inexpensive. And yes, there are a lot of podcasts out there, and a lot of people will say, well, there's so much out there. There's so much content. But many of the podcasts that you hear about, just the overall number, many of them are dormant. Podcasting, like books, it has a long tail. And we've been able to grow the Kintsugi Podcast into a top 3 podcast globally, which is pretty cool. But I do believe the message of Kintsugi, this ability to heal, to come together and highlight our scars as symbols of strength and resilience, is something that needs to be shared more broadly across the globe, here in America. It can give us hope and optimism that we can find a way to come together. And I really feel like a lot of people are checking out. They're not living wide awake. So I went through a lot of expense, time, and energy to put chapter 2 together. Although I had many amazing guests who are so appreciative of a platform willing to share their story, about half the guests, and I'm not going to name names, never even said thank you. They missed that important class in kindergarten, that class where we were taught that thank you is a complete sentence. So that experience, and I don't want to let these bad experiences with 50% of the guests that came on Kintsugi to color my pathway forward, because if I did, I'd probably just quit podcasting. But I took a moment over the last few weeks to hit pause, take a few deep breaths, and reflect about how I wanted to move forward. So yes, a whole bunch of people never said thank you after their episode and all their social media assets, their reels that we produce for them. After all that, they never said thank you. I can let that sit and fester, but that's not the type of guy I am. I rather think about all the amazing people that I've been able to bring forward to you this year. That said, going and finding guests and scheduling and all of it is a lot. And there's so much else I want to do in the world. I still am on a mission to help the world. 8 billion of us pause, breathe, reflect for just a minute each day. I do believe that if the world did that, if 8 billion of us, or heck, 800 million of us, heck, 80,000 of us, or maybe just 8,000, if enough people took just a minute to hit pause, take 3 deep breaths, maybe 6 for a minute or 2, and reflected about how they wanted to show up in the world, we would have a kinder, more peaceful world. And I'm on this mission. And I'm not giving up on this mission until the day I pass away. And so Kintsugi can be a vehicle to spread, to ripple this message forward. So we're going to change the format up again in chapter 3. Again, a little plot twist. I will still do from time to time an interview, although those interviews were quite long. And I do appreciate the fact that we're all busy and there's so much to consume. And a lot of people were like, I don't have time for 90 minutes or an hour. And I really don't want people to listen at 2x or even 1.5. Because what that does, and we don't realize it, it speeds everything else up. We're trying to do everything really quickly, and then everything becomes transactional. And I want the information I share to be more, as cliche as this sounds, transformational, not transactional. I want to bring about change. And I hope you do as well. I want folks to wake up, and I hope you do as well. I want people to believe in themselves, and I hope you do as well. So we're going to have shorter episodes, just 15 minutes. I'll drop them on Fridays. So it's just the perfect little nugget to carry into your weekend. And I'll promise you this. Most podcast hosts will have something in their show that says, hey, remember to subscribe and write a review and all that jazz. I will not tell you that. By now, hopefully, we all know that that can be really helpful. And I believe that either you're the type of person who will do that, or you're not the type of person who will do that. And either way, my love to you is unconditional. Clearly, it does help to share episodes and write reviews and like it and rate it with 5 stars and all that jazz. But I want to put my energy in providing you value as opposed to begging you to do some of the things that will ripple the podcast out to other people so other people can be helped. So instead of spending time on that stuff, I want to spend energy, I want to burn calories and trying to make this the best possible podcast I can make it for you. So you can step into your Kintsugi spirit. So that's how we'll go forward in chapter 3 of Kintsugi. And if you've been with us for just a little bit of chapter 2 or since the very beginning, thank you. And here's one tip I'll give to you. If you really want to have great success in health and fitness, career success, relationships, you can go off and buy a whole bunch of expensive gear. You can actually get that wearable that tracks how well you sleep. But let's be honest, you don't need some wearable to tell you if you're sleeping well or sleeping like shit. You know that when you wake up. So you don't need that gadget to tell you all that stuff. You don't need another unremarkable corporate workshop. No, those things don't lead to change. But what is a cornerstone to change is up here, your mindset. It's the conversation that you have with yourself. It's a story you tell yourself. And this story you tell yourself or this conversation that you have influences every other conversation you have with other people. It's what puts your ripple into the world. And we all go through, at least most of us, I'll raise my hand here, we all go through moments of self-doubt and imposter syndrome. And so having a healthier conversation with yourself allows you to dance with that self-doubt. It may never go away. For me, it never has. But I dance with it differently. And what I do is I bring forward all the times that I was able to rise up, to get through the hard moments, to get through the mud, all that jazz. In the conversation that I now have with myself compared to before my accident, is I try to put all that good stuff, all those moments where I did change, where I made things happen. That's in the forefront of my story. And yeah, I still have some moments where I feel worried or anxious, where I feel like an imposter, where I have doubt. That's natural. We're human after all. So if that's you, congratulations. You're human too. But once we decide to change the conversation that we have with ourselves, and this is the work I do when I go into corporations, but very few corporations want to go there. They want to do some fluffy workshop that never really gets deep into who we are. This is the work that brings about change. It's about hope and optimism. It's about belief. It's about knowing that you can do hard things, that you've got this. And here, I've got you. We do these things together. We go far together. So welcome to chapter 3 of the Kintsugi Podcast. I hope you'll stick around. We're writing a wonderful story about how to come back together, how to heal, and how to celebrate our scars as golden symbols of strength and resilience. I love you for listening. I love you if you didn't, and I hope you'll come back next week. Peace, kindness, and remember to pause, breathe, reflect.